How does your conscience work? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is St. Joe Society podcast. The St. Joe Society is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men order all things to Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at stjosephsociety.org. All right, fellas, this is Intro to Moral Theology, episode 21. Okay, last week we talked about what a conscience is. Okay, we looked at different views of conscience that are wrong. It's gut instinct, it's Jiminy Cricket, it's public opinion, stuff like that. And then we looked at what a conscience, proper definition of what a conscience is. And we defined it with the catechism as such. A conscience is a judgment of reason whereby the human person recognizes the moral quality of a concrete act that he's going to perform, is in the process of performing, or has already completed. In short, what a conscience does is it connects our knowledge of the moral law, of the moral natural law, and the concrete act we have to do. The conscience connects those two. So it says, thou shalt not lie. Okay. Some words are about to come out of my mouth. Conscience says, is what I'm about to say a lie or not? If the conscience determines that what I'm about to say is a lie, you put the brakes on it. If it's not a lie, you can go ahead and say it. So what the conscience says is it's the stand between what we're saying, thinking, and doing and what the objective moral law is. And that's why we said conscience is the subjective aspect of morality, because it's in us, the subject, and it connects the moral law to our actions. All right, this week we're going to talk about how a conscience works, okay? Now, when I put this together, this is one of the lessons that my students find most helpful, that I've found in my own personal life that's most helpful. Generally, this is probably one that would be easier to teach if I had like a whiteboard behind me and we're all together in class. But what I did is the content we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about how temptation works. I copied and pasted that section into the notes. So if you guys go to our website, you guys will see the meeting handout I normally give y'all. Go ahead and you can pull that out. You can pause that video if you want and pull that up and go to episode 22, and it'll have that on there. And it might be easier for you to track what I'm talking about. It's not that it's overly technical. It's just nice to look at it as I go through it. So anyways, it'd be good to pull that out. All right. How's your conscience work? The conscience works like a logical deductive argument. Now, this is not a logic course. Maybe someday I'll teach an online logic course for you guys, because honestly, logic's pretty fun to study, and it's super helpful. But what is a logically deductive argument? In short, a logically deductive argument, or logical syllogism, has three statements, okay? The third statement is a conclusion, and then the two previous statements are what are called premises. Now, the way the premises work is the first premise is what's called the major premise. It gives a universal type statement. The second premise is a particular application of that. And then the conclusion is what logically follows from those two. Let me give you a super easy example. And this is a standard example in logic. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Notice the major premise, the first premise was all men are mortal. That's a universal claim, and that's true. Okay. Not that it's a universal claim, but men are mortal. The second premise is an application of it to a particular circumstance. So all men are mortal is universal. Second premise, Socrates is a man. That's true. So this guy, Socrates, is a man. What logically follows from it? Socrates is mortal. That's how these work. For Aristotle, our conscience works the same way. It starts with a universal premise. That's the moral law. So like I said before, lies are not allowed. Second premise is the particular action, which is this thing I'm about to say is a lie. Conclusion, therefore I can't say it. Okay, see how that works? So you have moral law, first premise. Second premise, how does this apply to my situation? Third premise, what I can or can't do. That's how the movement works, okay? Hopefully that part was pretty straightforward. The part that you may need to kind of pull the notes up and have in front of you that might prove to be helpful is the next part. Because what I want to explain is how temptation works, okay? Why do I want to bring the temptation thing up here? It seems like, from what I've said so far, that morality is really simple and there's no good reason why people should not be moral. Okay. If you survey people on the street, say, is lying wrong? They're going to say no. Okay. If you ask them, is stealing wrong? No. Is stealing wrong? Yes. They're going to say yes. If you ask them, is adultery wrong? They're going to say yes. So if you ask them, is lying wrong, stealing wrong, adultery wrong? They're going to say yes. Those are all wrong things. Okay. The problem is, we also know from experience that those people, okay, most people have done one of those three things in one form or another. So if the statistics bear it out, probably everyone has violated those three to some degree or another. So this throws a little wrench in it, because it's like, wait, if our conscience is kind of clear what's supposed to be done, then why aren't people doing it? So this is one kind of the big questions that pops up in moral philosophy is, if conscience is clear, if the moral law is clear, and it seems to be, I mean, I argued last month that the natural law is written on the human heart, right? Why don't people just do the right thing? Okay. Well, one reason for that is what I want to explain next, is how temptation works. So for Aristotle, the way temptation, or what he called self-deception, works is he says we don't just have one syllogism inside of us, we have two. Okay. And I found, fellas, this is super helpful. Okay. So we're going to talk about how these two things work, and I'll give you some practical applications on how to apply them. Okay. I'm going to give you a couple technical terms, but if you have the notes in front of you, help out. Okay. The two types of syllogism. One is called the pro-heretic syllogism. The second is called an appetitive. When a person is tempted, they have both of these going on at the same time. Now, the pro-heretic syllogism is the part of you that wants to make choices based on what you're doing. Okay. For example, let's say a person, here's their syllogism. What is unhealthy should not be eaten. This particular food's unhealthy, therefore I choose not to eat it. That's the pro-heretic. The pro-heretic is lying is wrong. This thing I'm about to say is a lie. I should not say it. Adultery is wrong. This action would be adulterous. I'm not going to do it. That's the pro-heretic. Okay, that's one we just went over when I was saying the examples. The problem is when you're tempted, you have a second syllogism comes sneaking in. The second syllogism is not based on the object, what you're doing. It's based upon your feelings. So listen to the first premise of an example of an appetitive syllogism. It's called appetitive because it's based on the appetites, so it's easy to remember. First premise, I want to eat what is unhealthy. This particular food is unhealthy, therefore I eat it. See how that works? So with the first one, you're making your judgment. The pro-heretic, you're determining your choices based off the thing itself. With the appetitive, you're basing your decision on your appetites. Okay, and this proves to be really, really, really helpful. Okay, it does for me, and I think it will for you. Guys, what happens a lot of times when we sin, okay, when we're tempted to sin, is there's part of us that knows what the difference between right and wrong is. Okay, but there's another part of us that wants to do what's wrong. That's the appetitive. So we've all had this experience when you have this pro-heretic, that's the part of you that wants to base your choices on what you're doing, the object. And then there's a part of you that wants to base it off what you want. Okay. For Aristotle, this is how he explains how self-deception works. What happens in self-deception is you have the part of you that knows what I should be doing, the part of you that wants to do wrong, and they start warring it out. Okay. When the appetite gets inflamed, okay, it gets to be too strong, it overwhelms the intellect. Okay, so when the appetite starts stirring up, it overwhelms the mind. And what happens then is the pro-heretic goes away and the appetitive wins out. So the way this dynamic would work is this. Let's say a person's on a diet. They know they shouldn't eat unhealthy food. That McDonald's cheeseburger is unhealthy, so they're not going to eat it. The problem is they smell it. Now they smell the cheeseburger. They're hungry. They start thinking about all the wonderful moments they had with their French fries and burgers in the past. They remember the commercial on TV with the jingle that made them just want that cheeseburger so bad. And the more they dwell on it, their appetites for that pleasurable food start to increase. As those pleasures, so think of it this way, the pro-heretic's up here, the appetitive is down here. As they dwell on the pleasure senses start coming up and coming up and coming up. At some point, they override the intellect. So now the proheretic goes away and all that's left is the appetitive. Once that's left, the person then goes, I'm just eating cheeseburgers. Who cares? They eat the cheeseburger. Now what happens is once the appetite is satisfied, what happens to it? It goes away. What comes flooding back in? The proheretic. And what's that called? Guilt. Okay. Guys, this is how temptation works. The way it works is we have knowledge of what we should and shouldn't do. But a lot of times we want things that are wrong for us. Now, so long as the appetite stays down, okay, we can control it and make good choices. But when the appetite flares up too strong, it overwhelms the intellect. We then give into it. Once it's satisfied, it goes away. The proheretic comes flooding back in, and we feel guilty about what we did. Okay. This is why, and in future podcasts, we're going to talk about this a bunch. This is why it's so important that we do ascetical practices and we practice discipline. This is so important why we exercise, to strengthen our wills. We exercise temperance and fortitude, because what happens when you start to build character is those appetites are rightly ordered, right? They function the way they're supposed to, and they never flare up to the point that they overwhelm the mind. So people who have a lot of moral character, they can make a lot of good choices because they can think clearly about them. People who have bad or weak moral character, they tend to lose a lot because their appetites flare up and overwhelm their intellect. Okay. And this is where you get people in these vicious kind of habits and circles, is that when they're constantly giving into their temptations, it just keeps getting worse, kind of snowballing, and they just keep doing it. Where you'll find the opposite trend, where let's say God gives them some grace to overcome things, they're building good habits. What happens then is they start trending upwards and the moral life becomes more manageable. And so, guys, what we're going to talk about in the future a whole bunch, because I have tons to say on this and tons of stuff to teach you guys on it, is we're going to talk about how do we make progress in the moral and spiritual life by disciplining the appetites. Okay, that's going to come through our rule of life. So through practicing our rule, guys, if you're doing the best you can, you'll find that the disciplines will get easier over time. Okay, maybe very incrementally, but they will get easier. You'll also find, hopefully this podcast will help serve this end, but that you'll start understanding the moral life better. You'll start understanding the spiritual life better. And as you can think more clearly about it and you become more disciplined in your character, your spiritual life is going to start to gain momentum. And then as you start gaining this momentum, God then is going to keep giving you more graces to live up to it. And that's where you'll start really making progress. So guys, the entire St. Joseph Society is designed with all these types of insights in mind to help you guys grow in faith and charity, and love of God, love of neighbor, and in moral character. Okay. So I want you guys to spend some time. It's my encouragement to you. Spend some time thinking about how self-deception works. Guys, meditate on what appetites, right? Because they're different for all of us. What sort of pleasures, what sort of appetites are you particularly prone to? And then what can you do to keep those at bay, right? So how can you set your life up so that you're not overwhelmed by those appetites and you can set yourself up for success? In an extreme example, people that are alcoholics don't go to bars and hang out. And the reason why they don't is because if they sit in that bar long enough, their desire for that drink is going to increase to the point that they'll give into it. So a real easy hack for them is just don't go to the places where people are doing those sort of things. You remove them out of those circumstances, moral life becomes a lot easier. Guys, we can learn from that. And now that you guys have a little bit of Aristotle in your back pocket, hopefully now you can explain how that works too. So again, check out the notes online. If you need to listen to this section over again, it's well worth your meditation and time to think it through. But we'll stop there for today. I hope you guys have a blessed week. See you next time.